While it's now been over 6 months since President Obama took to the podium at the National Defense University and spoke about the need for more accountability and transparency for the U.S. drone program.
The very precision of drone strikes and the necessary secrecy often involved in such actions can end up shielding our government from the public scrutiny that a troop deployment invites. It can also lead a president and his team to view drone strikes as a cure-all for terrorism. And for this reason, I've insisted on strong oversight of all lethal action. After I took office, my administration began briefing all strikes outside of Iraq and Afghanistan to the appropriate committees of Congress.
It was around that same time that his administration leaked that one step he would take towards more accountability would be to shift the drone campaign from the jurisdiction of the CIA to that of the Defense Department. However, fast forward 6 months later to today, and the CIA remains at the helm of drone operations. So to talk about the stalled plan, I was joined earlier by Tony Shaffer, Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and the author of the book, Operation Dark Heart. I first asked him why this transition hasn't taken place.
I think there's two basic reasons. First, there has been a number of distractions, to use a polite term, relating to the NSA program's surveillance, as well as the Obamacare rollout. For whatever reason, this White House does not do well when it faces multiple challenges. So I think that those have been the priority. And as you look at the drone program itself, President Obama did actually make a very clear policy statement back in May, where he essentially outlined the fact that they were going to curtail the use of drones. And I'm told right now it is very difficult to get any sort of approval to use any drones at this point in time. Therefore, I think this is not a front burner issue for the administration.
Right. There are a couple other priorities in place, but can you talk about what kind of work is involved in transferring operations from the CIA to the Defense Department? How difficult is that?
It's difficult for two reasons. There's something called the Anti-Deficiencies Act, which basically says if you're given money for a specific program, it has to stay within a specific department. For example, if you fund DOD, it's supposed to stay in DOD, not go to CIA or vice versa. So I think there's going to be some programmatic things that have to be worked out. That takes time. That's legal issues which have to go through legislation. Much of this will be hidden within the NDAA, as a matter of fact. Secondly, is command and control. While DOD, I think, has the most robust command and control, CIA did develop its own separate capability. I've been to the drone room at Langley, and there's a parallel system. So what you have here are two competing systems, which are about to be, for the most part, collapsed into a single system. So there's all sorts of oversight and technical issues which have to be worked out. Not to say that it couldn't be done rapidly. It's just not a priority. So I suspect that the transition will continue probably for another 2 years. I just don't see people moving out rapidly on this.
Yeah, it seems like it's certainly a long-term goal at this point, but not going to happen anytime soon. Well, the fact that the CIA even has the drone program under its jurisdiction is a bit peculiar in itself. Can you talk a little bit about what the role of the CIA has been historically and what it's shifted to really in the last decade after 9/11?
Under the Clinton White House, EO 12333, Executive Order 12333, restricted heavily the use of any lethal method towards any world leader, any leader at all. There's been well-documented evidence that bin Laden could have been assassinated via a drone before 9/11. President Clinton decided not to do that. So with that said, since then, since 9/11, there's been an expansion of the use of these, what they call signature strikes, which are essentially assassinations. This developed under the Bush White House and was continued and expanded under the Obama White House over the past 5 years. So this is what the drone program became, and it was really managed by the CIA more than DOD. Both participated, but both had very different rules of engagement. For those of you who have read my book, Operation Dark Heart, I outlined the lethal process that we managed as part of DOD in Afghanistan back in 2003, 2004. Therefore, again, because these programs are compatible, that is to say CIA and DOD, they did similar things, there's still a number of issues which relate to what is the proper authority for someone to be assassinated. And this is where John Brennan came in. During his time at the White House, they were actually managing essentially an assassination list from the White House, which has really been something I think they've been trying to step away from, but they have not entirely eliminated at this point in time.
Right. And let's just say that the program does transition over, let's fast forward 2 years. Would the CIA completely relinquish its role, or should we expect that the agency would still contribute to the targeted killings?
Theoretically, my understanding is CIA would go back to what it originally had, which was essentially espionage and reconnaissance, a non-lethal methodology. DOD isn't, for better or worse, Department of Defense job is to kill people and break things. That's part of what their job is. And I think they are better at it. They have a better oversight system for conducting it and overseeing it. And CIA, frankly, did not have the proper oversight necessary to actually execute the program. And I think it's why we have problems with John Brennan and this hit list from the White House. So I think under DOD's auspices, I think it would be better run, better overseen, and frankly, more tied to a larger strategy of how to deal with Al-Qaeda globally than simply having CIA take shots at people on occasion.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the role of John Brennan. He's advised the president, obviously. Then he became the director of the CIA. How does that dynamic really play into all of this? Do you think that this has anything to do with why we're seeing such a slow transition?
Absolutely. I don't believe for a minute that John Brennan actually was sincere when he talked about pushing the program over to DOD for proper oversight. This is a power play. This is a power capability, a capacity. One of the main tools of the war on terror under the Obama White House has been the drone program. Therefore, now that Brennan's over at CIA, I don't see him easily giving up this power. As you know from being in Washington, it's all about power and prestige here in the city. Therefore, I think there's going to be a great deal of reluctance to actually give it up, even though I do believe giving it up to DOD is probably the right way to go.
Right. And speaking of that sort of power struggle, do you think that people at the CIA could be interpreting the potential transition as an insult in some way to their performance or a loss in the turf war with the Pentagon?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. With that said, there's been a constant battle between CIA and the services, if you will, since 1947, since the National Security Act of 1947, which created the CIA and had separate departments in DOD. Let's be very clear here. The Department of Defense has similar capabilities and capacity as CIA. The DOD capacity, I'm a DOD case officer. I was a DOD case officer. We did what we did for DOD in purposes of warfighting. CIA does it for their purposes, what they consider to be supporting the policymaker in the White House. So with that said, when you have inherently similar capabilities focused on different issues, there's always competition. I think there's clear competition here, and there will remain competition until the program is resolved one way or another.
Indeed, it seems like they both seemingly cover the same terrain more and more these days. But I want to quickly turn to another recent news item that is the Vatican's representative at the UN has now weighed in on the debate over drones. In a letter written to the UN, he expressed a number of concerns, including its violation of international law and the proliferation of drone technology. So how effective do you think this condemnation could be in challenging the current policies?
Well, first off, they're completely correct on the legality issue. My good friend Bruce Fein has talked about this extensively, a constitutional lawyer, and his concern obviously is if we can do it to someone else, eventually they're going to do it to us. It's inevitable. This technology is not going to be unique to the United States. Therefore, what are we going to do if, say, for example, China starts droning U.S. citizens in some country that we don't have control over? It's a slippery slope. So I think there's some great wisdom there to talk about how we need to resolve this legally. And yes, we have to be careful about this coming back on us. Secondly, the moral issue. Anytime you kill innocent civilians, and let me be clear on this, the drone program is not a surgical weapon. We've documented dozens, if not thousands, of innocent civilians being killed by this. Therefore, I'm against the overuse of drones. I'm not saying I'm not against the use of drones. I'm against the constant, continuous use of drones as the primary means of taking out terrorists, because we kill innocents, and by that killing innocents, we create the next generation of terrorists. The Vatican is completely correct about that. So this is where I think we have to look both at the legality and the morality of the continued use of drone programs to the level that the Obama administration did. I'm not saying not using them, to not use them. I'm saying we have to be restrained in how we use them. If not, there'll be secondary consequences to our actions.
Sure. And then there's obviously the other issue of drone proliferation and other countries following suit. And we have China held its first test flight for a stealth drone, and countries all over the world are investing in drone programs right now. Do you
Right.
expect that condemnation over the U.S. drone program will die down if other countries proliferate their own UAVs?
I think it'll get worse. I think the whole thing is a Pandora's box about to come open again. And this is a technology issue which we have to consider carefully. What we do today may be done to us tomorrow. So I think as we expand this, NATO is going to be obtaining this. Russia is developing theirs. China. I predict within the next 5 years you're going to see a massive drone war, if you will, something we have to get our arms around.
Well, thank you so much for that great insight. Tony Shaffer, author of Operation Dark Heart and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research.
Thank you.